Okay, so today we're opening up a black-necked swan egg. For oocyte membrane removal, you really need only a few supplies. I have a dish here with just some distilled water. I have some phosphate buffered saline, but you can also use distilled water. We'll be placing the membrane into the dish afterwards in the phosphate buffered saline. I have a pair of scissors, and then I have 2 sets of forceps to help peel back the membrane. So with a smaller egg, you don't really need the scissors. You can often open up the egg just using your fingers. But for a bigger egg like this, I like to use a pair of scissors to crack through the shell. I try to open up the egg without rupturing the yolk so that I can get a good look at it and see if there's any embryonic development. And I'm using a black dish because it makes it easier to see the membrane once I've removed it. And then I'll usually move it around a little bit to see if I can find germinal disc. Seeing a couple different pigmented spots on the oocyte. In this egg, it's difficult to tell if it's been fertilized because the egg is a few months old and it looks like the disc has been degraded. Okay, so now I'm going to use my same pair of scissors to make an incision across the yolk and through the yolk membrane. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and remove the area around the germinal or blastodisc because I'd like to stain this separately. See if I can see any cellular proliferation to help determine fertility. So I kind of just make a little square, and it's already popping up. So then I'll just use my forceps to scoop that entire area, and I'll just put it directly into a test tube because I don't want to lose any of those cells. So I have my tube for my germinal or blastodisc, and I'll go ahead and set that aside for staining. So now I'm going to use 2 sets of forceps to peel back the oocyte membrane. You can see it's already started to come off by itself. So I'm trying to remove the oocyte membrane here, and you may not be able to get it off in one piece, especially with a large membrane like this or the crane membranes that you'll be working with. So it looks like I've got a huge chunk of it. You may have albumin stuck to the membrane. Go ahead and just transfer that with the membrane to your next container so that you don't lose any of the membrane. So now I'm going to add some phosphate buffered saline. You could also use DI water if you don't have access to PBS, and fill up both of my petri dishes. It's important to try to remove as much albumin and yolk as possible from the membrane for staining. So I'm just going to agitate the membrane in the PBS to try to get some of this albumin off. Okay, so you'll want to pull as much of the membrane free of albumin over to your next petri dish. So this is a nice chunk that has very little albumin on it. It's almost impossible to get all the albumin off. And sometimes I'll use scissors. Here's some chelacea right here. I'll use scissors to remove that and set it aside. So piece by piece I'll just transfer the membrane to my next petri dish for a second wash. So here's some albumin that's still attached to this membrane, so you want to get rid of that. And here's a nice piece of membrane that's free of albumin. So once I've removed as much albumin and yolk as possible, I'm going to go ahead and place my membrane into the falcon tube for shipment.